Hey everybody, this is Blake here, and I am hungry, but you may have noticed how much weight I've lost, over the past year. It's because I'm very careful how many calories I eat and when I consume those calories, and I'm not allowed to have my lunch for another 29 minutes. And when you want the time to move faster, it seems to want to go slower. So why not kill the time and talk about The Hobbit, the Battle of the Five Armies, which I actually saw much earlier than I usually would. I generally go to the theaters on Friday, but instead I went Wednesday and I saw it on the IMAX in 3D, so that was quite the experience. So before I start going into the actual film, let me just briefly discuss the franchise in general. I am a fan, but I also believe that the original trilogy is a little overrated while this newer trilogy is a little underrated. In a lot of ways, my feelings towards both Star Wars trilogies are kind of the same, but at the same time very different. I think the original Star Wars trilogy is a little overrated. I think it's odd how much people criticize like the dialogue and the comedic relief of the prequels, when especially the first Star Wars movie suffered from those same issues. For some reason, whenever Leia interacts with Peter Cushing, it's like it draws more attention to how bad of an actress Carrie Fisher was at that time. But the difference is, I really like the original Star Wars trilogy, flaws and all, whereas I don't like the prequels on really any level, even though I don't think they're as bad as what how people make them out to be. I can't remember the last time I watched the prequels. And in the case of The Lord of the Rings, I really loved The Fellowship of the Ring, but even though I thought The Two Towers and Return of the King were good movies, I'm not in love with them. They didn't have that same impact that The Fellowship did. I just disagree with where the narrative went. I think breaking up the characters was a mistake because, so much of the dynamic was lost, and they have to, interact with new characters whom they aren't going to have as much time to flesh out and make interesting. I know that's what the books did, but I am probably criticizing the books too. It just doesn't work as well in film. Now, of course, with the books, you do have more time to flesh out these newer characters. And also, I thought visually, The Fellowship of the Ring focused a lot more on the parts of Middle Earth that were very fantasy-based, where the elves lived and so on, whereas Two Towers and Return of the King focused more on the human part of the world, which just is kind of boring in comparison. But I do believe that they're good movies, easily 3 out of 4 stars based on my system, and I understand why so many people think that those films got better and better. I just disagree. With The Hobbit, though, I did like the first Hobbit, The Unexpected Journey, even though I totally agree that the pacing was really, really slow and awkward. The only reason I liked it is because it does recapture the same atmosphere that was present in The Fellowship of the Ring. It just appealed to me, but at the same time, I would say that it was inferior to the original trilogy on a technical level. Now, I really liked The Desolation of Smaug. I thought that was a much more exciting film. Great balance of comedy, action, horror, drama. It blended all these different emotions and or genres, and I just thought it was much more exciting than really any of the Lord of the Rings films were in terms of pacing, even though, once again, I still prefer The Fellowship. But I thought that was a step up, and I was interested to see where the Battle of the Five Armies would go, because this is where it all comes together. If you want to call the Hobbit trilogy a success or failure, it all comes down to, the final film, because God, where do I go with this? It's where we decide whether, all that supposed padding, the awkward pacing, whether it was worth it. And was it worth it? Kind of. Unfortunately, I do believe the Battle of the Five Armies is the worst of all the Peter Jackson Lord of the Rings / Hobbit films. Now that's not to say it's bad. In fact, I enjoyed it probably just as much as I enjoyed, The Two Towers and Return of the King. But it's very shallow in comparison. You see, this is almost one big 2.5 hour long action sequence. The first 20 minutes starts off where Smaug attacks the city and gets killed. I know I'm probably spoiling this for some people, but it's in the first 20 minutes. To me, the first act, there is no spoiling. That's just the setup to the rest of the film. I personally think maybe Smaug should have died, or Smaug, however I'm supposed to pronounce it, should have died in the second film, because then it would have meant more, whereas here his death just seems kind of unimportant compared to everything else going on. But still, it was a great action scene. I really enjoyed it. And then there's maybe 20 minutes of talking and plot building, and even some action sprinkled in there as Galadriel, Saruman, and Elrond break Gandalf out of Sauron's prison. That's total fan service that this movie did not really need, but it was kind of cool seeing Saruman in action, finally, considering they kept setting him up as this big badass wizard, but he never really did a whole lot. It's even worse in the books. And then Galadriel does her, hulking up thing that she did in the Fellowship of the Ring, where she suddenly becomes all shadowy and scary. I thought that was silly back then, and it's just as silly now, but at least with Fellowship it was kind of startling how sudden, she went into that form. Here, I thought it was goofy, but whatever. But then it's like the rest of the film is just one huge battle, and that battle is very awesome. I thought the special effects were usually really good. There are moments where the CGI definitely looks like CGI, and I don't know why, but it seemed like the CGI here was inferior to what the previous films were doing. Maybe it's because more practical effects were used in the previous ones. I don't think that's the case, but there were times when it was more noticeable here, but still, when the special effects worked, they were just as great as you'd expect them to be. And then, of course, the battle scenes are really well choreographed. In fact, of all the big, armies clashing scenes of the franchise, I thought this was probably the best. I really enjoyed just the various moves, the tactics that all the sides use. The stakes really did feel high. And of course, the main heroes, have so much personality that, it's fun watching them fight these orcs. What else can I say? The 3D I thought wasn't very great. Like I said, I saw it on IMAX, and I don't really regret seeing it in IMAX, but I will say that the 3D for the most part didn't stand out to me, and when it did, it was more distracting than appealing. I don't remember if I saw the first Hobbit in 3D, but I did see the Desolation of Smaug in 3D, also in IMAX, and I thought it was much more powerful there than it was here. But like I said, the choreography is really good. It's an awesome action sequence, and you know what? The Battle of the Five Armies, whether you like it or not, is easily the fastest paced of all of the Lord of the Rings and Hobbit films. Honestly, by the time it started winding down and it came to the ending, I was like, is it seriously almost over? Because I feel like there should be an hour left. Were they going to, for some reason, have that segment from the Lord of the Rings books where Saruman invades the Shire? And I don't know, but it ended, and And I was surprised. It's strange that a 2.5 hour movie felt like it was an hour shorter. And then later that night, I watched Tekken 2 Kazuya's Revenge, which is an hour and a half long movie that feels an hour longer. But still, it went by quickly. I was never bored or impatient. The ending, it does run out of steam a little bit, but I was more concerned that I just felt that these characters weren't always properly resolved. It's just like the movie sort of got sick of itself, so rushed to an ending. But it's not like The Return of the King, where it won't let you go. I remember I saw that in theaters, and after like the third fake ending, the audience started to audibly groan. And but this wasn't that bad. And I think that's really all I have to say. The acting is really good. And Peter Jackson does include some really, really cool visuals. And I'm not just talking about the special effects, I'm talking about the ideas behind the special effects. I really loved that scene where Thorin's going crazy in this golden hall, which, like, pretty much engulfs him. That was really well done. And there's this other shot that later on sort of echoes that, where he sees like an orc floating under the ice. Very beautiful and just, a good visual idea. However, this film doesn't really have any heart. It has no substance. All the other Lord of the Rings, they did a great job at balancing spectacle with substance. But this film, it's like it used up all of its substance in the previous two Hobbit movies, and this one just kind of wants to get the final battle over with. Bilbo, even though he's the main character, doesn't feel like he has a whole lot to do. His character journey more or less ended in the last movie, so he's just here, and he shows up whenever the storyline needs him to show up. But overall, it was more Thorin's movie as well as the Bard's movie. In fact, the Bard seems to have the most screen time, but he totally vanishes during the ending. You see him like standing in the background, but very poor resolution. And there's a lot more screen time dedicated to that crappy love triangle between Legolas, I can't think of the girl's name, Evangeli, I don't know, it's the chick from Lost, her character, and then one of the dwarves. Did not need to be there. I did kind of like what they did with the high elf, Legolas's father. In the previous films, he was just kind of a pompous douchebag, but here they do develop him a lot more, and he was a more compelling character. And then, of course, could they be developing these other dwarves, or the Bard, or other people in order to make them more interesting and make what happens to them matter more? No, instead they give all this screen time to the annoying comedic relief guy. And I will admit that he is kind of funny, but he just wasn't necessary, and once again, there's no payoff to that character. Why was he even there? What else can I say about this? I don't know. For me, so much of the appeal of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings was just the journey, taking the audience through a journey in Middle Earth. I loved, exploring this world. I loved getting to know these characters. I liked how there would always be so many quiet moments where the characters would just bond and let their chemistry carry the scene. And this one doesn't really have that. There's no time to have that. It's just all action. I thought Thorin's character journey was really well done, too. I don't know, I forgot to mention that. That should have been one of the first things I said. His descent into madness is very believable, and his quest to redemption was just as believable. Usually when it comes to these kinds of movies, when somebody starts going crazy and kind of becomes an antagonist, it's a very steep jump, and you don't really feel like there was anything between point A and point B. I had that issue with Darth Vader in the original Star Wars trilogy, or at least when it came from point B to point C when he became a good guy. Although I did take some issue with when he went from point A to point B in the prequel trilogy, so there. But I totally bought it. You know, you could tell that he was starting to go down a darker path in the previous films, and when he takes that big step, I bought it, and I thought the actor really nailed it. He showed a lot more personality. He was kind of scary, but there's something pitiful about him too. I liked the tricks where they'd like make his voice suddenly go deeper and a lot more creepier, just to show how much this darkness was consuming him. And then when he realizes, but what a monster he's been, and starts becoming a good guy once more. I think it worked because you could still see the good person deep down within him, even at his worst moments. I really liked that scene where he thinks he sees Bilbo stealing something, so violently confronts him, only to realize that it's just a pine cone or something. And Bilbo explains that he wants to plant it in his yard, and that he will treasure these memories, and that which is why he does not need actual treasure. And he can't help but smile at that, and it's a sweet moment. So once he does start to redeem himself, and he doesn't just act like the Thorn from the first movie, where he's kind of the quiet, stoic guy. Now he does smile a lot more and seems more appreciative of the people around him. So I thought that was very well done. It's just too bad that the Battle of the Five Armies is such an ensemble that even he doesn't seem to get enough screen time. Nobody does. And admittedly, the source material is a little problematic, because it would seem odd that this character, the Bard, who barely has a role within the book, kills the main antagonist. I don't know how they could have fixed that. But still, in the end, I thought this was all spectacle, little to no substance, but the spectacle was very successful. As I said, I really enjoyed the battle sequence, and it was very fast-paced. I don't want to call this film a failure. It just wasn't as good as what I wanted it to be. So if you did like the previous Hobbit films, definitely check this out in theaters. I don't know if I'd go to the IMAX or pay a significant amount of money for it, but I do think it's worth watching on the big screen. If you did not like the previous two Hobbit films, but maybe liked the Lord of the Rings, the first trilogy, then it's up to you. If you think, it's going to be a better experience on the big screen, but still, you might just want to wait till it comes out on DVD or Blu-ray. This film won't change your mind either way. If you had plans on watching this but wanted to wait until it comes out on the small screen, then just do that. If you did not like the original trilogy very much, nor these prequels, then I don't know if I'd bother. But I did do a written review of this. I haven't posted it yet, but by the time you watch this video, it should be up. So please read that as well. I also did written reviews of Journey to the West, Conquering the Demons, a Stephen Chow movie, Spookies, an 80s horror flick, and of course The Pyramid, which was a horror movie that came out last week. I have like 3 movies I've written reviews of but haven't released yet that should come out over the next few weeks, which includes Samaritan Zatoichi, Ragnarok, which is a Norwegian horror-ish type of flick, and Tekken 2, Kazuya's Revenge. That will be another time. Be sure to follow me on Twitter and Facebook. And I also, if you have not seen it, there is a new Critiquing the Critics episode out on Xanath Will Rule. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I probably should start getting to work on my favorite and least favorite movies of 2014 lists, and I shall see you guys later.